Welcome back to the EJ Ward Field View Training Series. In this video, we're going to be going over the IoT Manager screen. To get there, we need to drop down the Site Management, and we go to IoT Terminal Manager. From IoT Terminal Manager, we can see a lot more than we can with the Ward 4 FCTs and even our Ward 3 FCTs, because the Ward IoT FCT is constantly talking to the system. So for here, we see information like the site name, the terminal number, our terminal code. We see when the last heartbeat was given. We see what status, if the network status is online or not. We can actually force a restart from the software itself to restart that terminal. And we can also do a remote authorization, which we'll be going over here in just a bit. At the top here, you just drop that down and select the terminal that you want. These terminals are sorted by the actual terminal number themselves. So it might kind of throw you off because the names are first, but just look at the terminal numbers at the end and that's in order. Below that, the information that we have displayed in front of us right now is the terminal type, so it's a Ward 4 IoT. We have the number of hose boards in there, so I have one 5-hose board in there. If you would have 10 hoses, it's going to have a 2 for the number of 5-hose boards. We have the number of pumps that are associated with this one. Now I only have one 5-hose board in it, but I have 6 pumps on there because I've added an extra pump, and that's just through the software, but it's not physically hooked up. You can see that the last pump here is offline because it's not connected to anything. And then we have the current software version. So right now it's on 2.15.2 for the software inside the IoT itself. Below that, we can run a terminal configuration. What this does is it packages up all the information in the system, the site configuration, its pumps, its tanks, all of the vehicles, the employees, and everything that's allowed to fuel at it, all the configurations as far as your fueling script and everything else, and it sends it out to the terminal. So as soon as you click on this, it's going to pull up a downloading screen on the IoT terminal itself, and it's going to go through a download so nobody can fuel during this point. If it's an Ethernet connection, it's going to take a matter of seconds to actually get it all downloaded. Sometimes it can take a little bit longer if you're on a Wi-Fi connection or if you're on a cell connection in a bad area. It might take a little bit longer, but it typically doesn't take longer than a minute or two to actually download everything. Updating the terminal software. This is something that the EJ Ward technician is going to do, or an EJ Ward tech support agent. This is when we have a new version of the software here. We'll put it on your server and then update the terminal straight from here. So we don't have to update it by manually going out to that terminal or anything. It's just right from this screen. We have our force restart and our remote authorization. So our remote authorization screen, or the remote authorization button, if we click on it, is going to come up with a pop-up. And that pop-up, we would put the pump number, we would put the vehicle that we want to put in there. And if you start typing a vehicle, it's going to look through all the vehicles in the system, so we can put it with that vehicle. We can enter an employee number, so we can put in the employee there as well. We can put in the odometer of that vehicle. Then it's going to be authorized by my user because I'm the one who's logged in, so it's already authorized. You can't change that. It's going to automatically keep that in there. And then it has your maximum quantity. So you can change this for this one transaction if you want to. And the reason why you would do this is, let's say they forgot their card or they don't have a card yet or something like that. You can remote authorize that fueling right off the bat. So I'm going to go ahead and click on authorize here. And now it's going to complete successfully. Once I hit OK, the pump is going to be able to be fueled on immediately right there. So they'll be able to actually pull up and start fueling on it for that one transaction, and then it's going to go back to normal. The other thing that we're going to be able to see is I don't have the pump with me right here, so I'm not going to be able to fuel on it, but you would be able to see the fueling here as it's going on. So we have an options here, and you can click on the auto refresh, and it's going to automatically refresh this pump information that you're seeing here every 5 seconds. So we can see when it was last updated, and it's just going to keep going. And now I can see that pump 2 is actually fueling and somebody's on there fueling. You're also going to be able to see how many gallons they've been fueling, but since nobody's actually fueling at that, I just remote authorized it, it's not going to show me any gallons. But you'll be able to see it as they're fueling, and that's one of the main advantages of IoT over Ward 4, because Ward 4 you don't know until the transaction's done. We can actually see all the information. We can see what transaction type is. It was a remote authorization. We can see the employee, the vehicle, all the pulses that are coming through. And now we can see that that pump just timed out for its timeout setting, so it went back to normal. And I also see what the last transaction is. So I can see the last transaction here. And since I didn't pump any with my last transaction, it's not going to show anything. And it's going to show the last real transaction that it had, and it was in bypass. So now we see our pump is ready. Everything is good to go, and it turns blue. So everything is with colors with IoT. And so we have red for offline. You have your blue, it's ready, and it's just idle. You have a green if somebody actually unhooks the hook switch or turns the hook switch off. So basically they pull out that, the nozzle and the filler neck. They pull out the nozzle of the pump. It's going to turn green. And then once they're inputting information, it's going to turn yellow, and then it'll keep yellow when they're fueling, and it's just going to say fueling and have the amount of gallons that they're pulling through that system as they're fueling. So I can see all of my pumps here, and I can see that my pump on pump 6 is offline, and that's because there's no physical pump there. I need to install another 5 hose board to be able to put that pump there. And then my first one is offline. So there's a couple things that we can do with this screen to find out why it might be offline. So the first thing that we can do is we can go into our hardware status. And so for our hardware status, we have all of the physical information for this board. So I can see that I don't have an RFSCTI board here. And that's just one of the boards that's inside of the system that talks to wireless devices like the CanCeiver hose module and a couple other pieces of equipment that we have. We have our front panel interface board. I have a hardware version and a firmware version for it. And then I have the hose board. So I have the hardware version of the hose board and the hardware date, which our hardware date on this guy isn't showing up. It's just not talking to it, and that's fine. But we do have the hardware version, so we know it is working. And then I have all 5 pumps on that hardware board and what their status is. So I can see all of these are on hook, so nobody's pulled it off hook yet. I can see the switch status is in auto for this first guy. The second pump is in bypass, and then the rest of them are in auto. I can also see the last pulse count that I had from them. So I had 10 pulses across all of these before, except for the bypass one. And then we have a relay status. So the relay status means whether it's on or off. That means whether it can be able to pump or not. It's enabled. And our bypass is always going to be enabled because it's bypassing our system. And then we have if anybody is fueling at it at the very bottom in the fueling status. So it'll say yes if someone is fueling. And we will then be able to look at it and see how many pulses are coming through the pulse count. You're going to see that change constantly. The next tab that we have is the System Logs tab. So every day our IoT terminal creates a new system log, and we'll be able to download it straight from here to your computer, and you can read through the logs. Now this isn't something you're going to want to do. This is more for an EJ Ward technician's purposes. But if we were to call and ask for a log for the terminal, you'd be able to go into the terminal, download the log, and email this to us so we can look through if there might be a problem with your system, or if you're having an issue, we can look through these logs and see exactly what's going on with that terminal. The next thing that we have are terminal alerts. This is going to be all the alerts that the terminal has had, the last 20 alerts, but it's through any alert that the terminal might have, and it's going to show what the alert code was, what the type is, and then the description for it. And then you're also going to have a pump number if that alert has to deal with a pump. So you can see that we had pump switch changed, and this is when I changed it to bypass over here on 311. And at 5:52 in the evening, I changed this pump 2 to a bypass mode. So that means it came from automatic to bypass, or it came from another mode to bypass. The 3 modes that we have are bypass, automatic, and off. So typically it would be from automatic and they put it into bypass. And you can go through the last 20 terminal alert information that you have. We can also look at terminal alerts from the terminal alert page, but it's just easier to see just this terminal's alerts that they have. Below that, we have our transactions. So we have the 2 transactions that we've done inside of this system so far. So we have our pump that was in bypass, and the quantity was 0. And then we have the remote authorization that we just did, which is another 0. Now, if we get 3 more zeros, it's going to turn that second pump offline because it has a 0 gallon limit of 5. Then we have our fuel scripts next. So the fuel script is actually going to show exactly what you need to do to fuel. So we have the fuel script name, which is bypass. And the bypass it will take is a vehicle card, an odometer entry, an employee card, then an employee message. So it's going to ask you for information. And then you go off hook after that. Now with this, bypass is a little different because bypass, you don't have to do any of these, but it can take all of these if you want to. We have our CANceiver information, which is just CANceiver only. All you have to do is go off hook, and once that hose module hooks up to that CANceiver, you're good to go. Then we have our tag, which is the same thing. It can go off hook and hook up to that tag. And then we have our keypad, so it's only going to be keypad fueling, so they're only going to put information in with the keypad. They're not going to have any cards or anything to use. We put in the vehicle number, and it just shows vehicle card. We put in our odometer entry. We put in the employee information, and then we go off hook with that. So all of these are going to be different for every single customer. And these could be different per terminal if you want them as well. But most of the time, all of them are going to be the same unless they're a truck terminal. Truck terminals might have something a little bit different. And then the last tab that we have here is the terminal software update. So it's going to show who updated this information and what version did it go to. So here I have my original version, which was 1.0.12. And every time that I've changed it, it shows me changing it all the way up to 2.15.2. So you can see every time that that terminal has been updated in the history that terminal's been inside of the system. From there, we can go to multiple terminals. You can have this one sitting here. You can have the auto refresh on and just sit here and watch the terminal go. But really, other than that, that's all the information that we get. The last thing that you have is if you want to update this information up here at the top. All this information is separate for what's being on the auto refresh. The auto refresh is just changing what's inside of the terminal information box. All you have to do is click on this little refresh symbol here on the top right hand side, and that's going to refresh all the information inside of the terminal status. So I can get a last heartbeat update. I can make sure it's still online. I can, if the terminal code is changed or the terminal number is changed, I can see that. And then I can also force restart it if I want to here. That concludes the video on the IoT Terminal Manager. Thank you very much for watching, and I hope to see you in the next one.